So, welcome to Fika Fridays. I'm really excited to introduce to you again our guest from this week's episode. I'd like to see if I can share you in here. For some reason, it's not showing. Gotta love when you have this new technology and it doesn't seem to show in. Let's see. Come on. This is the one we want here. All right. So much for technology working when you want it to, right? It's just showing that. Let's see. Here we go. There, that's much better. So here we have Soledad, and we are live on Global Nomad Hacks, and we just had this amazing episode finally launch. We've been really excited waiting for this to launch because it was so fun to actually do the interview and reconnect. And for some of you that are listening, you know Soledad, where we go way, way back to our middle school years, and it's just been really fun to reconnect and hear her story more about her global nomad. She was one of the first people in my life that I really experienced sort of what it's like to be living in a different culture through her experience at a young age. So welcome, Soledad.
Hi, Heidi. Great to see you.
So, as everybody knows, we're still in lockdown, but you are even more so. You're in Madrid. We talked a little bit about this in the green room before coming in. Can you give us a little bit of a sense of what's going on there and sort of how that's impacting your life? Because when we last saw each other, you were in Barcelona, and that's no longer the case.
No, that's no longer the case. So I've been in Madrid for a couple of months, and I never would have imagined that would last so long. And it's been pretty intense. The lockdown is very strict here, and one can see why that's important. So it's certainly been difficult at times to adjust to not being outdoors and wearing masks all the time and just being so careful. But I think that this is a virus that I'm no specialist in, but that I have lived through the kind of worst moments of this virus in Madrid and seen it up close, more up close than I would have liked to. And I think that we really can't be too careful because, as we all know, it's not just a question of our own health or coming down with something, but also the fact that we could be carriers and spread it. And so it's been quite amazing to see Madrid. Madrid is a city that people go out 24 hours a day, and bars, restaurants, and just transformed to a complete, small town village with everybody in their homes, and really a lockdown, like a wartime lockdown. So it's been, I've never seen it like this.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't even imagine because, I mean, we've had, like we were talking about before, we're so spoiled because we have open space that we can get access to. And, a city environment is really, it's a totally different experience. And what we're seeing here as things open up, there's a lot of conversations about people choosing to move out of the city. And they've said, because of this experience, I don't want this to happen again. And also because of this experience, they have they've learned that they can work virtually and that it works well. And a lot of companies are now saying, like, we're not going to let you back in the doors until until probably, after the end of the year. And what does that mean?
Right.
You're in academia, and so I would imagine this really impacts you as well. Are you seeing some of the same shifts within your workspace? Are people deciding to do more remote, or have they not even gotten there yet?
I think we're not really there yet. I think that there are many different scenarios being examined, and that we'll just have to wait a few more weeks. And it's actually quite unbelievable, right? Because we've been such an impatient generation. We've been, and the generations who are younger than us, we're just so used to getting everything right away and knowing everything and all this control and planning and kind of power over our lives and our time. And suddenly it's like, we don't know anything. we know very little. And everything that we seem to know is questioned, right? Masks or no masks, or if you've had this, are you immune? Who knows? So we have all these questions that have already been hanging around for, 3 or 4 months, if we look at it globally, and we don't have the answers yet. And it's just something we have to just kind of hang back. We know, I think we all value technology much more now because it's been able to get us through in many ways. But I think that, at least in terms of academia and teaching, I personally am very much looking forward to going back to the smaller scale model with people in the room. So
I would imagine.
Hopefully that.
Yeah. And I mean, how is it for you? You've been doing some remote teaching anyway, but I mean, I would imagine learning a language or learning about a culture, you need to have that integrated experience. What are some of the things that you've seen that have helped you, or have they been the biggest challenges because of, sort of the remote learning model or the shift?
Now, so my semester turned to remote kind of 5 weeks into the semester, and I felt very lucky that I had those 5 weeks with my students. So we had a basis, we knew each other, and we had that connection. So then it was just taking that online. I had never taught a course where you just start from zero online, and so that would be a brand new experience for me. Something very important in terms of language teaching, and you know this because you've raised bilingual kids, and is people need to see your face when you are speaking. And so I think that something that is a concern is what kind of masks, right? What if we need to wear masks, if we can do a hybrid situation where you're online but also meeting with people in small groups, they need to see your face and your expression. And so, what are we talking about? Those visors, right? Those visors that come down, and I never imagined it, but if that's what it takes to get us back in the classroom, who knows?
Well, I would imagine, I mean, particularly the southern sort of Mediterranean languages are so much involved, the facial expressions and the hands and the gestures are so much a part of the language. And if you don't have that physical interaction, the language becomes very different.
That's right. I mean, everybody knows kind of the eye roll, but the eye roll is one of a million expressions, and it's true that the hands and everything. So I think that we will figure out a way to make do until we can transition back. In my case, I'm not an online educator. That's not my training, and I've certainly done my best in the past few months. And yesterday we had our last online class, and it was very sad. Mm-hmm. And so we were very sad, to say goodbye and have that last class. And so I think that even if it's Zoom, even if it's online, the emotion is still there and the connection is still there. Because I was absolutely, just very sad after that last class.
So, I mean, you work for Williams College, and it sounds like we talked about it before, I think there's some partnerships with some other universities like Brown that had brought you to Barcelona. But are they planning on having classes in the fall, if like physical classes? And have they talked to the professors there to say sort of how should we do this? Or is that still, there's just so much unknown?
Are round the clock. So of course they're talking to everybody, and like I said, we're hoping in a couple of weeks to have maybe an idea of a clear model. But it's understandably very difficult, to make this kind of call, because the way that the virus has evolved around the planet, and taking into account that almost every, institution of higher learning, like liberal arts colleges or huge universities, they're international, right? So students are coming from different places. Travel is involved. And so how can you make that safer? These are huge questions. And so I think that people are very, very rightly taking some time to try to figure this out.
Yeah.
And it's hard for parents, it's hard for professors, for students, it's hard for everybody. But I think it's a good idea not to rush to some plan that won't be able to to kind of hold.
Yeah.
And so it's better to do the kind of careful work that we all just have to be super patient now.
Well, absolutely. And I think that, one of the things that does cause is a lot of disruption and sort of just general well-being and how you're feeling about, how you're functioning. I found that I've been using the expression all week of quarantine brain. For some reason, I keep on just sort of, I'm missing things or I'm double booking and I'm doing things that are just not my normal behavior. And there seems to be a little bit of permission for that to happen. Whenever I've sort of responded to someone and said, I'm so sorry, I must be having quarantine brain. They're like, I get it. I'm feeling that as well. And there's sort of this feeling of I want to be productive because I have all this time or space to do things. But that may not necessarily, when your brain is in sort of trying to figure out what's next, it may not be so easy to compartmentalize and say, okay, I need to get this done. And I know you were working on some writing. Have you had a chance to do that?
I have. And I also, I think that the quarantine is so different for everybody, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you have somebody near and dear who's very ill. This is a nightmare time. I mean, it's really terrifying, right? Because that kind of isolation mixed with any kind of, worry about somebody's health or well-being or one's own well-being is just, awful. So, but if we're taking just, a healthy situation where there's, socioeconomically everything is okay and everyone's in good health, there's still, all these question marks about what's coming, right? Mm-hmm. So even if everything else is pretty good, I think most people are a little worried about how this is really going to be affecting them in the long term. And that's a drain. That takes a lot of time. Takes energy and time away from you, whether you want it to or not. And I know out on the West Coast, you guys are hiking all the time and going for beautiful drives. And that's very nice. We are not yet there in Spain. But for me, my work has been, it's kind of an escape. I love doing it. So any writing that I've gotten done and teaching have been super important, and at the same time with my students, they had a spring break but our semester was interrupted by the pandemic. And so I thought, they're just home. We have to work every day, we have to keep working. And at some point they said, no, we need our spring break. And I thought, okay, this is it. So they need structure, they need stimulation, but they also need to recover because they've just had to fly back from Barcelona to South Korea, to San Francisco, to Chicago, and, adapt to that and adapt to the fact that their study abroad and their semester was interrupted. And there's a lot of adjustment going on, and so I think it's a good time to get things done, and like you were saying, good time to give yourself a break too. Yeah,
and I mean, if you guys are stuck is not the wrong word. You're very fortunate. You have a roof over your head. It's sometimes we have to sort of get that perspective and remember that that sheltering in place or being safe at home is probably a better way of phrasing it. Nonetheless, I think a lot of people have taken up old pastimes or old activities that have provided comfort for them, whether it's like knitting or journaling. Or what are some of the things that you've done? And you're back in your home city of Madrid. Are there some things that maybe you have access to, even with the quarantine, that are comforting to you, that help you find that sense of sort of grounding in the midst of crisis?
I have never cooked so many meals in a row in Spain in my life. Spain is you go out, you get a beer, you get a pincho de tortilla, you get a coffee, a toast. 80% of meals can be had out in Spain, some for under €2, at the local bar, your coffee and toast in the morning. So that has been completely, off limits. Everything is still closed. There are takeaway places, but we haven't done that. So I have never, cooked so much, had to just kind of produce so many meals and be so organized in my life. Luckily, I love to cook. So that has been a very good thing. And, but, I will be ready for a break soon. So.
For sure. It was funny. I noticed, I even did that, and I'm not a big chef. I cook all the time, but I'm not, it's not something that I'm super passionate about. But I love cooking for a dinner party or, a meal where people are excited about coming and eating and enjoying it. But just the daily cooking is not very gratifying for me. That said, last weekend, because it was Mother's Day, I was sort of inspired to make a Swedish summer cake for my sister. Yeah. And of course, sometimes it's hard to find some of the ingredients, so you have to adapt them because in the US and in Sweden, because it's such a common cake, you can actually buy it in you buy like the base cake that's already pre-sliced very thin with the layers. So you just basically pop, the whipped cream and strawberries in there. And it's super, super easy. But I had to make it from scratch, and I had to make it gluten-free. And so it was sort of this, for me, it was almost like a little engineering challenge, to sort of like, how can I make this work? And I was so proud of it that I posted it. And then but what was quite joyful for me was how many people responded to that. It's clear that a lot of people are baking, and they're, that's one of those outlets. They're like, oh, tell me, what's the recipe? How does this work?
Well, it's a beautiful cake.
Yeah.
Beautiful cake. I'm not baking because we are not allowed to go outside except for, just very recently, a little bit in the morning, a little bit in the evening. But I've been trying to make very delicious but healthy meals. So trying not to make sugar-loaded meals. And but I see all this incredible baking going on, and actually your cake was the one that most caught my eye.
Well, it's not very sweet, so it's a good one.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know.
No, it's a fascinating thing, where the things that provide comfort for you when you're abroad. One of the things that I don't know if we really touched on, but I think is always fascinating, because you're like me, you go back and forth. You have sort of two homes, or or even three, and within that, sort of, what are the things that you carry with you from each place that you can't live without? So, for me, I have like funny little things. I was talking about this the other day. When I go to France or to Sweden, I always bring, a Costco-sized heavy-duty aluminum foil for grilling, because the aluminum foil that you get in the European grocery stores is so flimsy you can't put it on the grill.
Right. Not to mention the saran wrap that doesn't cut.
Yes. So what are some of the things that you can't live without that you bring back and forth from the US to Spain or the other way around?
Well, it's interesting because I have, things that are very personal to me, like a couple of photographs or pieces of jewelry. But ultimately, I will leave either place thinking, I need all these things from here to make it over there. And then a lot of those things just end up in my suitcase, and I end up adapting and getting new things there. So I think that I need transitional objects. I need them for the trip. But then whether I really need them so desperately once I'm there, I make do once I'm there, whether it's the States or here. So I think it's more psychological for me than, pragmatic, like then I really need this, product.
Mm-hmm.
One thing, for example, in Spain, you can't buy Epsom salts in any pharmacy. Mm-hmm. So it's something that I have to order online when I'm here, but I don't bring them because, huge amount of stuff.
Well, and that's the thing, is now you can just order it online. I mean, I remember, all of the wonderful travels that I did in sort of my 20s, and things that I would bring back with me because they were sort of, you could only get it there. And now you can just order it online. And it's like,
Right.
why did I schlep it all the way home? Particularly if it was a fragile item and it sort of barely made it home. I could have just bought it
Well,
online and probably for the same price that I paid for it.
there's still things like ceramics and stuff like that you know things that are traditional artisanal things that you can only buy in certain places, and those are very special now, right? Especially now
Absolutely.
that things can be bought online, and I think we are all kind of trying to buy local, and but yeah, I need much less, and during this quarantine I've definitely realized that I need even less than I thought I did. I mean,
For sure.
yes, much less. So just the important people, food, and a nice place to be and be able to do some work, and that's pretty much it. So
Yeah, it's amazing how little we can get by with and feel quite all right and be able to fully function and be productive. And I think this, in a way, this COVID has given us that gift of perspective of what do you really, really need, and
yeah.
do you really need all the extra stuff? Um,
Hmm.
so I think for me anyway, and I think a lot of people that I've spoken with, I get the same reflection of, I don't need so much. I feel pretty good. In fact,
Right.
it feels good not to have so much stuff going on.
Right.
It's kind of a relief in a way. So, so when you're able to get back to your stuff, because you have your home in Williamstown, you'll be going back there to teach. Do you think that will change the way um, that you live, or the way that you sort of move in the world, or will it just be going back to same old, same old?
No, I think I will sense some relief because I've been away for a long time, and it is, my home and my professional base, and I always feel relieved to be there. It's my home, it's my house. I redid it, and so it's always very nice to be back there. And it's not an urban experience. It's a yard and a brook, and it's just very different. And I feel very good there. So I'm looking forward to it, definitely.
Yeah, well, I'm sure your garden is probably really wishing you were there right now. Everything seems to be popping everywhere. Although, do you know they had snow last week?
I know, I know.
It's
I try to
crazy.
ignore those that kind of news. I've lived in New England long enough that snow in May is not exciting.
No, it's more of an irritation. It's like, oh, things were just
Yeah,
starting to grow. I remember that in Sweden. It's like, you're sort of waiting for that first crocus to pop up, and you're like,
right.
oh, signs of spring. And then 2 days later, you get frost. You're like,
Yeah.
really?
But
Yeah.
anyway,
So you've got a book coming out, and we've shared it on the resources page on Global Nomad Hacks. And can you give us a little teaser on the book?
oh, I don't know if I can give you a better one than I gave in the interview. Um, it's a coming of age story, and it's about somebody growing up between two cultures and trying to kind of figure out the history of their family that they didn't really have access to in the new culture, which was the United States. And so just kind of trying to piece everything together. And so I think that it's and suddenly that past becoming relevant to the main character. So maybe she thought that she, was over the past, that she was just living her life and being who she was and being free. And suddenly she realized, wait a minute, this really matters to me, and I need to know. And so it's a lot about how, it's a life across an ocean, it's a life across generations, and really kind of an homage to family and generations and things that get lost and things that stay, that continue, are passed along
Hmm.
in unexpected ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I really look forward to reading it. I think it's going to be fun. And does it have anything about your Milton years? for those of us that were part of that experience for you?
Well, just to keep everybody interested, maybe.
Maybe. Well, I'm sure it'll be fun to even just to get, perspective from Soledad. And I think there's so many little tidbits that I think for some of us, one of the things that my sister and I always joke about is that we remember things differently. So we remember the same experience very differently. And it's fun to, at first it's sort of irritating. When it's your sibling, it's very easy to get irritated because it's like, no, that's not what happened.
Right.
But when it comes to reality, it's more just we all have very different lenses on as we're experiencing different things. And, and yet there's certain things that stand out that you remember very clearly. Like you and I remember that stupid shirt that that we passed between each other it was so important, the bullseye shirt. And for any of us, but if anybody that knew us back then knew about the bullseye shirt, I mean, that was something that you can't forget.
No.
So
I think it was kind of punk, right?
Oh,
it
totally.
Was like and this is not my book, but I don't know if you've read. I think you would enjoy it. Kathy Valentine. She was the bass player in the Go-Go's, and she's just published this incredible memoir. No, but it's really interesting. No, I also thought the Go-Go's something from the teeny bop years, but it's a really beautiful memoir. And anyway, I don't have the title on me, but it was just great to read about that whole period of things that, we had access to, but we didn't really take them seriously, right? They were just like pop bands. And she's written this great book.
I'll have to go check that out. We'll see if we can find it, and we'll put it in the notes for people for later. But there's so many good books. So while we're at it, can you give us some good book tips on things that you've come across during whether it's during quarantine or before? I mean, you've got a great background in literature, so I'd love to hear what your recommendations are for reading right now.
Well, so Kathy Valentine, which I just finished, and I think one of my favorite books, and it's kind of a quirky book, but it's really a lot of fun. It was reissued by the New York Review of Books Classics several years ago, and it has a fun name. It's called The Dud Avocado, and the author is Elaine Dundee. And it's a really fun book about a young American woman who goes to live in Paris in the 50s, and nothing is as she expects it to be. And she has to learn a lot of lessons while she's there. So I think that it's, a very interesting kind of Americans abroad and culture clash, expectations versus reality. And she has a wicked sense of humor. So, I mean, the book was endorsed by, the blurbs were Groucho Marx and Hemingway.
Oh my God, I love it. And it's called The Dud Avocado?
The Dud Avocado. The Dud Avocado. So, like that, the dud, like when you have a car that's a lemon, the Dud Avocado. And I really recommend it. It's a very unusual book, and it's really fun.
That sounds like a great suggestion. And I want to actually do a quick plug because your partner has a great book that he's on my list to read. But so you guys were about to go, I guess it was in June. There was going to be a big event around his book. And can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's also really fascinating. I mean, that's, years ago, but that was basically global nomads in a totally different perspective.
Yes. Well, so he wrote a first book about the first Japanese embassy to Spain, and it was supposed to be a trade embassy, and so it was composed of, I don't know how many there were, 12 or 15 Japanese samurai who took a very long route to Spain via California. It's this really exciting trip. And so John Healy, really researched this, and he created named Shiro becomes the kind of, the protagonist of this book. He's a young boy, leaves Japan. He has to go on this mission. But it's a beautiful story. I mean, his novel is beautiful. The history behind it is beautiful. So all these Japanese end up in Sevilla. The business deal goes south, but some of these samurais stay behind in Sevilla and marry Sevillanas, marry women from Sevilla, and their descendants still live there today. And in order to preserve this, centuries-old legacy, they have all kind of gotten rid of whatever their last name would have been and changed their last name to Japón, which is Japan in Spanish. Oh. So, there's, for people who like soccer, there's a soccer referee, a very, very famous one, whose last name is Japón Sevilla. And so we just kind of see, and he's a descendant of, these samurai. And so they preserve this legacy very carefully. So John has a book called Samurai of Seville that kind of tells the whole story and situates you, and it's all about this character, Shiro. And without giving too many spoilers, there's a sequel which is called The Samurai's Daughter, which just came out a couple of weeks ago, I think, in the States. And this book is the daughter who has been raised by her father, and her father is Shiro. The mother was a Spanish woman who died. And so it's her life between Spain and Japan in these very difficult, times. I mean, now we have difficult times too, but then just in terms of travel, everything was so much further away. And again, I don't want to give out too many spoilers, but they're both published by Arcade, and they're really interesting historical fiction, East meets West, and in very beautiful places.
I love it. Well, I hope they will still do the event in Sevilla when things lift up a little bit more, and I hope we'll be able to come and attend, because it sounded really fun, and it's always great to celebrate an author.
Inspired by his novels, so we don't know anything yet, but hopefully it will be postponed and not canceled. So
yeah,
in the worst case.
Yeah, well, very exciting, and I love what you guys are doing. And do you have any plans for any new books after now? Well, I mean, this one's just done, and it's going to be launching in June, isn't it?
No, it's going to be launching at the beginning of November.
Oh, not until November. Okay, so I pre-ordered it. I'm waiting. You can still pre-order it. So
be patient. We have to be very patient.
Be patient to read it, though.
I'm bringing out some books by Spanish women that were not in print, and I'm reissuing them with introductions and footnotes, and working with a press here in Sevilla doing that. And I also have a second novel that I'm working on, which is about a friendship between two women, and two young women who have gone to school together, and one of the women disappears. So this is a very different change in gears for me. It's a mystery.
Wow, that sounds like fun. Does it take place in Spain?
No, it takes place between the U.S. and France.
Ooh, well, we'll have to talk about that one when it comes out. I'm excited.
And the friend who doesn't disappear is the detective.
Uh-huh.
Becomes the detective.
Sounds like a movie to me.
Oh, good. I think so. If you want to produce it, let me know.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm necessarily up for producing, but I definitely know some people that could do that for you. Actually, we should get our old buddy Sam Bisbee on it.
That's right.
Yeah, that's his game. Yeah.
Okay.
And,
we can post music too. So.
Yeah, there we go. We'll get him to do the music, and throw together some of our old buddies. Sam and I actually know each other from all the way from Sandbox days. We lived in the same neighborhood when we were very little. So my mother keeps on sending me funny pictures of Sam and I when we were very small. Often it's the same photo.
You have to post one of them. I'd like to see you. Well, yes. His uncle was my teacher, U.S. history. Yeah. So, family. Okay, well,
So
please send me the link to the podcast so that I can share it. And it's been a treat to speak to you again.
absolutely. And for those of you who haven't listened to the episode and you're listening to this Q&A now, the episode is live and it's available anywhere you can stream podcast, or you can just go to globalnomadhacks.com and you can stream it right from there. And if you're interested in pre-ordering Soledad's book, you can go to globalnomadhacks.com/resources and you'll find it right in there. There's a link, and I'm sure you will love it. It's going to be a great book. I'm looking forward to reading it myself. So
Thank
thanks
you.
for joining us. It's been such a treat. Stay safe, and hopefully we will see you soon. Not sure where, but we will. All right.
We will.
Take care.
Hasta pronto.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.